Stick to the agenda. I assume she's in there.
Yeah, she's got it. She did thumbs
Okay,
up.
thank you. All right. This is the July 11th, 2023 meeting of the City of Jefferson Historic Preservation Commission. My name is Alan Wheat. I am the chairperson of the commission. Please, if the members will introduce themselves by name for the roll call. Aaron, we'll start with you.
Right here.
Yes.
Aaron Mealy, Ward 2 City Council, and I'm the liaison to this commission.
Donna Dietz.
Brian Warren.
Christine Boston.
Deborah Green.
Laura Ward.
Brad Schaefer.
Tiffany Patterson.
Rachel Sinzi, city staff.
Lynn Kirshner, city staff.
Thank you. And our only absent member is Amanda Burke Williams. Are there any members who are disqualified from voting on any agenda items tonight? None. Demolition clearance public hearings over 100 years old. Are there any requests for a continuance?
Are you the property owners? Okay, contractor, so there you go.
Are there any requests to reorder the agenda? Rachel, will you please read the format of the hearing and order of the testimony?
Okay. Point of order. Are we gonna do the minutes and adoption of the agenda, approval of minutes?
Yeah, it's coming up.
It's coming up.
Oh, okay,
Can we-
sorry.
Can we outline the rules of the public
Oh,
hearing?
I
and
see
then-
it. I see. My apologies.
No, it's okay. Keep us on our toes. I'm going to go ahead and read the format of the hearing and the order of testimony. I would like to briefly describe the procedures of the commission. The proceedings of the meeting are being recorded, so please, we no longer have a microphone, so please just project yourself. The microphones are up on the ceiling. If you hear a little bit of a feedback, that's what that is. The standard order of each case is as follows. After introduction of requests by city staff, the applicant or their consultants will provide information on the request. The opening presentation by the applicant can be limited to 10 minutes unless additional time is granted by the commission. The applicant will have 3 additional minutes for closing testimony if requested. We will then ask to hear from supporters of the request, and then we will ask to hear from opponents of the request. We will then ask to hear from anyone else who wishes to speak on the request. Testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes each unless additional time is granted by the commission. City staff will then make their recommendations on the request. In order to reduce the time necessary to hear an application, reference to printed material, including staff reports and applicable findings, shall not be read into the record unless directed by the commission. The commission will close testimony from the floor. The commission will then discuss the proposal, then publicly make its determination with reasons. The form of the motion shall be positive, that is, the motion shall be made to accept the request as presented or with modifications, stipulations, or conditions. A final vote will be taken with ayes in favor, nays opposed. The chair shall announce the results of the vote, specifying the number of votes cast in favor and the number of votes cast against.
Rachel, do you have a list of exhibits?
Yes. So the following list of documents are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration at this public hearing. The City Code of the City of Jefferson as amended, copies of applications under consideration, copies of drawings, plans, or renderings under consideration, letters of memoranda from staff, staff reports, minutes of proceedings, correspondence of other materials submitted by the public or the applicant, rules of procedure for the Jefferson City Historic Planning Commission. These items are public record and available for inspection in the Department of Planning and Protective Services or through the Office of the City Clerk. Please be advised that any items that are presented, distributed, or otherwise received pertaining to the cases under consideration become the property of the commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, petitions, and letters.
Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda as printed that you have in front of you?
So move. Second.
Okay, we have a first and second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the regular meeting of June 13th, 2023?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, we have a demolition clearance public hearing for over 100 years for 901 Jefferson Street. You have a staff report?
I do. Does the applicant, do you have anything to say before we go through?
The only thing I was gonna say, is we went through this process last year. I just missed the 1 year time period of getting the building tore down because we moved on to another project. I think the pictures will show that there was a fire in the building several years ago. The main structural beam in the basement has been burned in half and collapsed. The whole main floor is collapsed down onto the inside of it. When we looked at remodeling the building and possibly just redoing it, it got up to be a pretty expensive price tag. And then to put all that, there's a limestone foundation, like a rock foundation that's really old in there that's leaking and deteriorating a lot, and didn't really want to put that kind of money into a remodel. That's why the decision was made to tear it down.
I'll go ahead and move into the staff report. We received the demolition application for 901 Jefferson Street. The purpose of the request is to demolish a business establishment located at 901 Jefferson. According to Midmo GIS, the structure was originally constructed in 1889. Here's a map of where the structure is located. And as the applicant mentioned, the Historic Preservation Commission did review this in April of 2022 and approved the applicant's pursuit of a demolition permit. But we have, in the existing code, we do have a 1-year requirement to get that demolition completed. Otherwise, we have to go through the process again. So here we are, going through the process. So it was most recently the scuba shop. Historically, we did go through the historic preservation review staff analysis. The property is not listed on the National Register, nor is it a landmark designation. It basically did not qualify except for the property was once Aaron's Grassley Grocery and later Ferguson Grocery. So it was a grocery store. This building was declared dangerous by the city of Jefferson due to the fire damage that occurred inside and then subsequent water damage from that. In reviewing section 8-44C, the criteria as outlined above, the structure does not appear to hold sufficient historical significance in terms of heritage, cultural, or architecture. 901 Jefferson was constructed in 1889 and utilized as a business establishment. 901 Jefferson was formerly Aaron's Grassley Grocery, which offered general merchandise, feed, and flour. And the property was also last utilized as a scuba shop. The south side Old Munichburg neighborhood plan indicates that the land use is for residential single family and this building should remain. Current zoning of this area is C2 commercial. However, because of the internal structural damage due to the fire, it is staff recommendation that the motion that the demolition clearance application for 901 Jefferson Street is recommended for approval by this commission. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do any commissioners have questions for Rich?
Not for Rachel, but I do the applicant. Don't we hear from public first before they ask questions of the owner? Okay. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of the request? If you are, please give your name and address for the record. Okay. Now, is there anyone present who would like to speak in opposition of this request? Again, please give your name and address for the record. Okay, is there anyone who would like to speak on this request? Now can she ask her questions? Okay. Laura. Okay, the copy we received of the actual demolition application is really, really small, so I don't know if the answer is within this application or not. But what are your plans for that lot? I know you had
I do not have a blueprint for the plan for the building that's gonna go there. The initial plan is there's gonna be, it's be 3 stories, there'll be a basement, which will be mainly storage. The main floor coming off Jefferson Street will all be office space for rent. And then there'll be a top floor that's undecided whether it's gonna be 2 apartments upstairs or more office space for business to rent. But I don't have a blueprint or a plan or anything as far as moving forward with the building. We just need to get a vacant lot there before we can, start designing something.
And would your plans, would you consider like incorporating some type of historical character to a new building that you're gonna put there? I know there's no local historic district in that area. However, that is a historic area with properties on the National Register all around it.
I mean, it's a possibility. I've had to do that before. I did some duplexes on West Main Street that we made them look more historic. I mean, that would be an owner's decision. I'm the contractor on it. That
Right.
would be something that I can definitely discuss with him whenever the plans get drawn.
And your parking, I'm sorry if I'm, are you gonna have back parking? Are you gonna maintain the same historic setback?
The setbacks will match everything city code wise and stuff. It really depends on the size of the building we put there as far as what it's gonna be for parking. I know there's not any street parking on Jefferson Street, so we will have to incorporate some sort of parking, whether that's like garage parking in the basement side of it or a parking lot back behind it off of that alleyway, one or the other.
Because I know the old Munisburg Association in that area is really against any new construction that has front parking in order to retain the historic character of the neighborhood. So just to consider that when you develop your plans.
I believe the front of the building now is mostly, I mean, it's right up against sidewalk area.
Yeah, it's a
concrete there.
wide
If
sidewalk.
we were to keep the same layout and format type thing, then yes, it would probably avoid parking up front. Just because of that sidewalk area, don't want to block the sidewalk anyway, so.
And do you have a timeline?
Pretty quick, sounds like, I mean, if we get this approved and get the demolition permit, I'd say we'd be tearing down here within the next couple of weeks and start working on the blueprint for what's gonna be put back up.
And that's a double lot,
I
correct?
believe so, yeah. It's a double size lot, I think. I think it's been turned into one single lot
Okay.
in the past, so.
Are there any other questions? Do you have any other questions for staff? Rachel, do you have anything else?
I do not.
Okay. Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion? Motion must be in a positive.
Close the.
Hearing none, we close the hearing. 901 Jefferson Street. Now, would someone like to make a motion? Motion must be in a positive format.
I move the demolition clearance application for 901 Jefferson Street be approved by the commission.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'm gonna do a roll call.
Yes, I'll do the roll. Ellen?
Yes.
Dr. Green? Yes. Donna? Yes. Tiffany?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Dr. Boston? Yeah. Ryan?
Yes.
Did you get Laura?
You didn't get Laura.
Oh, Laura, yeah, sorry.
No.
Okay, so the vote is 7 yeses, 1 no, and the motion carries. Thank you.
So we'll send you a letter from the commission. It also, you'll still have to go to work with the building official to get your demolition permit.
Yes, I'll be working on that. All right, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Okay, old business.
So standing agenda item with the Missouri State Penitentiary updates. We really have none since the last time. We still continue to work on the programmatic agreement for the Economic Development Administration grant. We have invited tribal consultation so we're at that draft status where we have a pretty good foundation of a document to work with. So we're working with the Miami Tribe and Cole County as consulting parties. Once they provide their comments on the document, we'll have a public meeting. Right now, it's looking like we may be on task to do a public meeting regarding the programmatic agreement at the next Historic Preservation Commission meeting. That could make it a little bit of a longer meeting because it's really about the overall development at the penitentiary. So I feel like there might be some interested members of the community. But that is tentative because if we come back and consultation provides more comments than we expect, then it may be kicked to the September. But I wanted to make you aware that we're getting closer and closer to really discussing this in a public forum to start receiving comments back from the public. The next, sorry. Did anybody have any questions about the penitentiary? The next update, or in regard to our Historic Preservation Fund grant updates, we will have our consultant, Stantec, come and join us at our next meeting. I think it's August 8th. Yeah, August 8th. They will be in town at that time doing their field work. We also have H3 Studios, who is our consultant for our design guidelines, here with us tonight. We'll do a work session directly after this meeting to discuss that project. And I can answer any questions about the status of those. Very good. Communications received in your packet. We were notified of 2 Section 106 filings, both from the FCC for towers. There's one that is going off site address 500 State Road 94, which is in Summit, but I think they were wanted to see if there was any visual impacts that the Historic Preservation Commission was concerned with. Actually, they're both regarding that project. They just have different names. Same address though, 500 State Road 94. So if this commission has any comments that they want to make on the project, we can surely submit those.
Rachel, do you have any idea where that is?
I do not. When I did look. I mean, I do. I looked up the address, and it seems like I don't know. I mean, I suppose from certain areas of Jefferson City, you may be able to see it. But like maybe the airport, like North Jefferson City, that type of. But I don't think we could see it from this side of the river, from what I could understand. So there's, the Historic Preservation Commission could choose to comment or take no action.
Far enough out of our purview that even if it would have to be super, super tall to have any visual impacts on any of the historic buildings in Jefferson City, because I'm assuming it's either east or west of Cedar City there on 94.
It's east.
When I Googled this, it shows the Hitachi factory as being 500.
That is 500.
There's Hitachi's home.
I was gonna think maybe Lauf, where Lauf. Along there.
So,
Yeah, across the street from the.
Yeah, so it's kind of like.
I mean, I'm sure you would, if you were standing on the bluff in Jefferson City and looking at Hitachi, you would see it, but
forwarding on communications as received.
With binoculars.
Right.
So do we need a motion to, or just, it's what we said?
I mean, there can be a consensus.
Or we want it just as information?
So they receive the communication, we forward on any section 106. And it's a federal agency, so it's gonna go through this process regardless.
So a motion isn't necessary then?
Unless you wanna take action.
Does it say how tall it is?
It does not.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at too.
That
Well,
would
it
be,
can't be super tall because of the airport.
Yeah, that's what I was
I
wondering.
would think it wouldn't be, but it'd be nice to know.
I would say it has to follow those guidelines first. Airports.
There's also microwave pop. River right there.
Okay. Is anyone wanting any other information on it? Is everyone good moving on, letting the airport?
Airport should deal with it.
Okay, anything else, Rachel?
Other than we can move into our landmarks.
Okay.
Stewart's, would you mind pulling up the landmark award presentation for 1431 Greenberry Road?
Alt.
One has the.
Oh, that's not what I want. Which one is it? Sorry, guys.
Technology upgrades.
Yeah.
They make things easier.
That one's the other one. Well, you click on nominations and then came in.
There you go.
Okay. So, Alan?
So we went through, we received the Landmark Award nomination for 1431 Greenberry Road. The application was submitted by Wayne Brondel and Laverne Brondel. And the contact person was Lindsay Pitts. I believe they are here this evening. The historic name of the property is the Dewey House. This is one of our lovely Frank Miller designed houses that we have in Jefferson City. The city council did approve 1431 Greenberry Road to receive the landmark designation at its May 15th city council meeting. So we brought in the applicants to go ahead and accept their landmark award plaque. This property is very exciting to us because it is already listed on the National Register of Historic Places, but we like to locally acknowledge our local treasures as well.
Ready?
So we'll bring you up, we'll do the photos, and we'll give you the plaque. There's 2 screws with the plaque, don't.
When you
Use the
part,
hardware.
just come see me, and I'll give you the mounting instructions and the screws and the package. Do we have the plaque for a photo?
Why don't you all come down for the picture also?
Have the actual brass plaque?
Yes, we do.
Why don't you all come
Where you guys?
You got it.
Yeah, you guys are part of it also. We
can
never
stand-
get recognized. You guys gonna stand there?
Yeah, we can photo.
Stand behind you.
Yes, sir.
There we go.
It's been a while since I had chairs.
Oh,
Stand between. Look.
bring in my daughter.
This picture of
There you go. You can turn around this way.
Yeah.
You guys go.
Should we scooch over a little bit to
where you
sit
want
in
it.
center in the,
Yeah.
can you get a little closer? Yeah.
Over here?
Okay. Okay.
Good.
Hey,
congratulations.
Thank you. Before you go, is there anything exciting you'd like to share about your property?
All I can say is we bought it about 25 years ago and raised our family there. And the whole 25 years that we've been there, my wife Laverne, who passed about a year ago,
Yeah.
worked all 25 years to toward this award right here. And we thank you very much for that.
And Wayne, didn't you all have to interview with,
Oh, yeah.
to get the house?
Mrs. Adams made us interview, bring our kids over and interview people to buy the property. It wasn't all about the money. It was to make sure that we were the right family for that property. It was pretty cool. She was a nice lady.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
The instructions are in the envelope.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming.
right.
We like to see the good side, not just demolitions.
And I'm not sure, do we have anybody?
They did not make it.
Okay, so we will maybe offer the next meeting, or we'll just, if they don't wanna, if they don't wanna.
I don't know, I might contact them and, yeah.
Okay.
I think they met, I have not seen them. I mean, they just look, she's a walker. I know her dogs and I haven't seen
So
them.
they're out of
So I think they're out of town.
We can try again for the next meeting.
That's my guess.
So we'll go ahead and postpone the 13th in Moreland, if that's okay with the chair.
So don't forget, leave this under here.
Take it back.
Okay, any public comments? Okay. Dates to remember. The next regular bid meeting is August 8th, 2023. And the Historic City of Jefferson's weekend tour is August 6th. And if you need tickets or information, you can see Donna. Otherwise, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, just one more announcement. The Missouri State Museum and Jefferson Landing State Historic Site has their public meeting on July 27th at the Loman Building at 6 p.m. And we will be talking about the museum hotel and the conceptual design plan for the museum. And so please come and,
Is that, did you say Loman Building?
yeah, the public meeting will be at the Loman Building in our conference room.
What was the date again?
July 27th, and it'll be at 6 p.m.
A motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you. Okay.
We'll have to call the work session to meeting.
Okay, all right, so I'd like to call our work session to order. Are we recording this meeting also? Okay, or this presentation? Okay. We have no agenda. Correct? Oh, okay. We have an informal
The agenda is our
This is Tim Bryhan, everyone.
Tim.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Yes, Tim, Brian.
Do we need to do another roll call for this?
Without an agenda, let's be as formal as possible.
Okay. Starting again for roll call, Aaron, will you state your name for attendance, please?
Aaron Mealy, Ward 2 City Council.
Anna Dietz.
Brian Warren.
Christine Boston.
Okay. Alan Wheat, Chair.
Deborah Green. Laura Ward.
Tiffany Patterson.
Rachel Senzi, city staff.
Dawn Kirshner, city staff.
Okay. And absent for tonight's presentation is Amanda Burke-Williams. Thank you for being here.
Great, thank you all for having us here tonight. So I want to first express my appreciation and gratitude to the city for choosing to work with us on this exciting project, and to you all for agreeing to stay a little later after the meeting. I promise this will last no more than an hour and probably less than that. But what we wanted to do tonight is to kind of have a bit of a kickoff work session with you all on the Jefferson City Historic or Jefferson City Design Guidelines process that we are still in the fairly early stages of with the city. And the purpose of this is really to get your feedback as the primary city body and citizen body that deals with design guidelines within the city. Get your input on the current state of the current guidelines in the city, where there might be deficiencies, particular challenges or issues that you may face when reviewing projects and making judgments on projects, and to just collect this input, because where we are in the process right now is beginning to outline the scope and the parameters of what we'll be developing, working with the city to develop and working with you all to develop for this. And so this is really important input at the front end to help us begin to flesh this out in a way that makes it useful to you all. So that's really what we wanted to focus on tonight. You have two pieces of material in front of you. The first is this workbook. I'm going to ask you guys, everyone please, if you could, while we're going through the presentation and discussion, if you could write any ideas or feedback that you have in this. We'd like to collect these at the end of the work session, but not to worry. I know there's a lot of information in this that you probably want to spend some more time reviewing. And Rachel has digital copies of this that we can send out to you tomorrow. We've also begun to prepare a preliminary outline of the components of the new guidelines. This is a very early working draft. We're not going to spend a lot of time going through it in detail tonight, but again, if you could review that and provide any feedback that you have to Rachel, and she will get it to us. Just quickly by way of introductions, now that the kind of the parameters of the work session have been set, my name is Tim Bryhan. I'm a principal with H3 Studio. We are a planning and urban design firm located in St. Louis. My personal background, I am a planner essentially, but my personal background is in historic preservation. I'm a qualified historic architect per 36 CFR, and we've done similar projects to this in a number of communities throughout Missouri, and we've worked in Jefferson City in the past. Our firm, and I was the project manager on this, developed the historic Southside Old Munichburg plan about 5 or 6 years ago now. My colleague Javier is here tonight as well. He's been spending this afternoon doing a lot of on-site field surveying, and we also have as a sub-consultant Monarch Architecture. They're a small architecture firm out of Columbia, Missouri, and they're actually, as the guideline process moves along and we begin to draft them, they're actually going to be doing some kind of test case analysis to get essentially a perspective from an architect working under the guidelines as a way of helping to refine these as we develop them. So the overall objective for the project is to prepare updated design guidelines for Jefferson City that follow the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties, and that also address issues of infill development. And the ultimate goal of these guidelines is, while we're focusing on 4 particular areas, which we'll get into in a moment, the goal of these guidelines is that they would be able to be applied to other historic districts and existing historic districts and potential future historic districts or overlay districts within the city over time. So we want these to be fairly comprehensive and fairly flexible, so that essentially then there is one process and one set of standards that all projects are reviewed and approved under. And this was something that Rachel has been very adamant with us on, even in the early stages of the process, that the current regime for these guidelines is quite convoluted, and there are different types and different parts of the code. So we want to make sure that these are all consolidated and that there's a consistent basis moving forward. As you probably know, this project is being funded through a grant from the State Historic Preservation Office. It's essentially organized into 3 phases. The first phase will result in the development of the 30% draft, which is essentially an annotated outline of the guidelines. That will be complete on or around September 5th. Then in phase 2, we will work to develop the first kind of full draft of the guidelines, which correlates with the 70% draft design guidelines milestone on or around October 31st. And then the 100% draft will be completed on or around December 15th. And following that, then we'll do final review with the State Historic Preservation Office, and the whole project will be finished no later than the end of February of 2024. So just kind of a quick overview of the process. So as you can see, we're still fairly early on in the process. So what I wanted to do as a way of just kind of setting the stage for the discussion is to go through a very quick kind of summary analysis of some of the existing conditions in the 4 districts that are part of this study. And then we'd really like to just open it up for any discussion or input that you would like to give us at this point. And again, what I will note about this presentation, this is a very brief summary of the work. We have a lot more detail, which you can see in some of the maps that are in your workbook. We're not going to go through all of those. But again, we will get you a copy of this presentation in the next day or two. Rachel will send it out so you can go through it in more detail following tonight's meeting. So this process and this guideline update project came out of really 2 planning efforts. The Jefferson City Historic Preservation Plan from 2019 and the city's comprehensive plan in 2021, which really set up the reasoning for this project. And within all of the various districts, National Historic Districts, neighborhood conservation overlays, local historic districts, and landmarks, what we're really focusing on in this study are 4 specific districts. The Capitol Avenue Historic District and Conservation Overlay District, the School Street Local Historic District, the Lafayette Historic Legacy District, which is a bit of an odd case because there are no buildings nor are there really any redevelopment opportunities in that area. And then finally, the Lower Jefferson Conservation District, which, as we understand it, was the first of the conservation districts that was established in the city. So what I'd like to do now is just to kind of go through some of the high-level points for each of these, and then open it up for discussion. So starting with the Capitol Avenue Conservation District and Historic District. So, this represents kind of a snapshot of neighborhood development in Jeff City from roughly 1830 to 1945. There's quite a mix of building styles and building uses within the area. And of course, as you all know, this area has been of concern to the city given the high number of derelict and blighted properties, which are essentially owned by a single party. And this district was also severely impacted by the 2019 tornado, which has resulted and continues to result in additional vacant lots, and has probably contributed to the general decline in the condition and the general blight of buildings in this area. So, a number of key concerns here. Number one, how can improvements to the buildings be guided and facilitated, and also how can infill development on many of these lots, some of which are quite large, like the one at East Capitol and Lafayette, how can those be guided to be contextually sensitive to the existing fabric? Couple of key plans you can see there that we've that provide the background and justification to this district, and because of its status as a conservation overlay, this district actually has one of the more comprehensive sets of design standards of any of the 4 districts that we're looking at, and you can see them there. These are part of the city's Code of Ordinances, Section 35-34, dealing with new construction additions, front porches, exterior alterations, accessory buildings, land use, and then site design and building design with a number of sub parameters or sub criteria within those. One thing that is interesting to note about this, and we were having a meeting earlier today with some of the planning staff. The items in the design standards that are highlighted in red, these essentially simply refer back to the underlying zoning for the district, which is primarily in the mixed use zoning classification, with a few properties designated as planned unit developments. And so as a result, particularly some of the smaller parcels are actually, you can't build on them because they're too narrow to support the underlying zoning side setbacks, for example. So this is an interesting case. It's certainly, I would say, the most complex of the 4, and really in some ways provides kind of the full spectrum of issues that the design guideline update process needs to deal with. Moving on to the 2nd district, which is the School Street Historic District. This is, of course, located primarily off of School Street and Lafayette, with some frontage along East McCarty as well. This really represents kind of the community history of the post-Civil War Reconstruction era through the 1960s. And it was a historically African-American neighborhood because it was one of the few parts of town where African-Americans could freely live prior to the passage of the Fair Housing Act. The neighborhood itself is quite intact, although there are a lot of challenges with deferred maintenance of buildings and general building condition. And again, a lot of that is due to the fact that this area is located almost wholly within the floodway of Weirs Creek, which the flood regulations obviously inhibit the amount of investment that a property can receive before it is required to comply with the new flood standards. But it does represent, per the nomination statement, the best preserved and most intact representation of the city's African American neighborhoods, where other areas just adjacent to this were cleared through urban renewal. And this is, again, a very challenging area, primarily because of its location in the floodway. There are guidelines that have been adopted for the area, dealing primarily with exterior site improvements. And this entire area is located within a single, drawing a blank, I apologize, on the zoning district that this is located in, but it's all within a single residential zoning district. And again, like some of the other districts, some of the site requirements refer back to the zoning, so that also introduces complications when it comes to making improvements to these existing buildings. The Lafayette Historic Legacy District, again, this is a very unique example because it is a historic legacy district as defined by the mayoral proclamation. It really is a district that is designed to recognize a history that's been lost and a fabric that's been lost. There are no physical development guidelines that were proposed as part of the establishment of this district. And so one of the things that we're going to be working with the city and with you all, and to be perfectly frank, we don't have the outcome for this district defined yet, but it's really going to be about articulating some principles by which that lost history of this area can be reestablished and celebrated in the community through mapping and interpretive projects and other things like that. obviously, the scope of this particular project and the grant funding does not include doing a full kind of cultural history plan for this area, but we will certainly be working with the city to put some guidelines into place and some principles into place by which that can be pursued in the future. And then finally, the Lower Jefferson Conservation District. This is obviously quite an interesting area, mainly because the majority of it is, as you all know, the large parcels between West Main and the river, the historic Heisinger properties and the current Heisinger, the bluffs at Heisinger. And we understand that this was a conservation district that was initially established in response to some of the proposed developments on those large areas. And one of the interesting things about this is that this is one of the few districts in the city where there has been some significant infill development that has been done under and according to those guidelines. But again, looking at the area in terms of the current conservation rehabilitation focus and the current focus in terms of potential for infill development are really the properties along the south side of West Main, which again, represent we would say a fairly typical Jefferson City residential fabric, particularly from kind of 1900 to 1915 or thereabouts, and obviously with the old West Side School and it kind of is the centerpiece to that. And again, this area currently has fairly robust standards that really differentiate it from the underlying RA2 zoning. But again, the idea being that working through all of these 4 districts, understanding the issues that all of these 4 districts and opportunities that all of these 4 districts possess, and then being able to develop a coordinated and more uniform set of guidelines with kind of a consolidated review and approval process is really what the intent of this project is moving forward. So to that end, we've begun to identify some key issues that apply in some way or another to all 4 of these districts, and these are issues that, as we move forward in the process, we're going to see how the updated guidelines can address. So, number one, how do we allow for and how in many ways do we facilitate contextual infill development in a historic area? That's one part of the process that's very important to the city, and in many ways kind of goes beyond the typical purview of historic design guidelines. How do we deal with existing historic structures in a floodway? Of the current districts that we're looking at, only the School Street District really faces that issue, but we know that there are other historic parts of Jefferson City that also face that issue, where this could potentially be applicable in the future. How do we ensure that the character of historic structures and historic neighborhoods are preserved and enhanced while not being unduly burdensome to owners? This was an interesting point that came up in our conversations, again, specifically about the School Street District, where because of the kind of the 50% limit due to the value investment due to the location in the floodway, we want to preserve that area, but we don't want to make it so that owners have to invest so much in their property that then it sort of they become disqualified, because then they would have to meet the floodway standards as well. How do the guidelines conform to the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic structures? We know that in many cases the guidelines that are currently in place for these districts do not conform or do not fully conform. And having that conformance with those standards is very important for other funding and resource opportunities. How do we establish a consistent review and approval process? It's very clear that everyone's roles and responsibilities are very clear, and how can that then be expanded throughout the city? And finally, how are the guidelines flexible and easy to be applied to other parts of Jefferson City where they might be of benefit in the future? So that's kind of a very quick overview of what we are looking at. And so really now I'd like to just open it up to any feedback that you all could provide in terms of key issues, opportunities, things that you deal with as the Historic Preservation Commission when reviewing projects. Anything.
I think the biggest challenge we had when we were going through the ordinances and looking at revamping all of those was just how do we determine, what does fall into those standards and what people can go through. There's gonna be a lot of rehab on Capitol Avenue and that whole area.
Mm-hmm.
And just how do we figure all of that out and the details of that? Because even when we went to address giving out landmark awards and changing the ordinance that had to go with that, and people didn't realize, oh, you get a landmark award, that kind of puts you in another category, and you can't do all these changes to your building without, meeting
Sure.
standards and all. So trying to get a handle on that for everybody is going to be, I think, the biggest challenge for some of us.
Well, and I also understand the necessity to have the same guidelines throughout to help staff on overseeing and making sure that don't fall through the cracks, because now it's supposed to be permit driven.
Mm-hmm.
City staff wants a permit. They go out and make sure things are being done, but that falls through the cracks. You have maybe property owners that don't even get a permit.
Sure.
And then you end up with, updates that don't fit within the guidelines.
Sure.
I like the thought of having something simplified because, School Street, Lower Jefferson were both neighborhood driven.
Mm-hmm.
And the property owners are the ones that wrote those guidelines.
Right.
And there had to be 75% of the neighborhoods who agree to those, following those guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
So hence it's really, really hard to get any local districts in our city. So we're losing things and getting inappropriate infill. I'm hoping that we have developers that would be sympathetic to the area that they're building in, but we know that does not always occur. The checkbox is done.
Sure.
So no, I like the thought of having some set guidelines across the board and making it easier on property owners to be able to do this process themselves and it not be so daunting. And plus, approaching your neighbor regarding doing this and not having anything to show them of what they're committing to. I've tried to, plead with neighbors saying, we get to decide. Unless they see something in black and white, that's putting a lot of trust in something they're signing their name to,
Sure.
to commit to. And our city staff, they don't have enough time to run around and creating these on their own too, but I would hope that we could get some kind of balancing act between the neighbors and the staff that together we can get these through.
Well, if we have something, to your point, if we have something that's written and specific, there's not inconsistency between different members of the staff, two different people looking at the same property and giving two different answers, which is always a challenge.
Well, I know that when we talked about this year and a half ago.
2021.
Yeah, so yeah, 2 years ago, a long time ago.
Yeah.
You know, one of the purposes was to be very educational, to be very graphic, and really use it as an opportunity to visual. Because no offense to our ordinances, but nobody wants to read those things.
Sure.
They're hard to find what you want, even with the revisions. They're not going to be easy to find. People aren't going to be going, oh, I think I, need to comply with ordinance 36. But they might, really look at a book that has a lot of good pictures. It has a lot of good drawings. It has options for, especially for School Street and other places. Like, this is the primo, what would we'd love for you to do. This is an acceptable alternative. So I think the more visual and more alternatives that meet the guidelines, different options, really being educational about style and material, is going to be helpful.
One of the things I find disturbing though is whenever you look at these maps, you can see properties that are already gone. A lot of properties are already gone.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice if there was some way for guidelines of keep saving properties before they get to the point where they're coming to us to be demoed. I think that's something really important for us
That's
to
a very good point.
figure out.
From a
'Cause
personal
we
point of
all
view.
know how to drive down the street and see properties that eventually are going to be gone.
Well, and too, when I created or hoped to create the Lower Jefferson one, we had a guideline in there about no demolition. And we had city staff said we had to remove it due to the fact that there was no ordinance, that protect anything. Back then it was really bad. There was really no protections for anything historic. So we have a little bit better protections now.
I think it'd be fair, I could speak on behalf of the body, but I think we have a little bit of demo fatigue, just for the tornado and catching up on some of those things. I think getting out ahead of some of the issues would be.
And from a personal point of view, trying to add to the district, without guidelines, it's hard to do that. We've left out the whole 600 and 700 block of East High out of the Capital District. It's just a big empty square that should have been included, but because nobody was willing to take it on and get involved in that.
Donna, you should write that down in your.
I already have it.
Well, and two, even though the guidelines will apply to the district boundaries, I live half a block away from the Jefferson, or block away from the Jefferson district. And if I had good guidelines, well, I'm an historic preservationist, so I'm going to try to do good things. But my neighbors, if they had something like, West Main looks really good, I want my house to look good too. So I think would encourage people, even if they're not in a district, if they're very educational and they're very pro-preservation and provide a lot of information, other people might go, well, I have an old house, what do I do with it? And they can look at the guidelines and say, oh, this is what other people are fine with.
Signing on it.
Well, who would want to? But at least hardy plank looks like wood or whatever.
I think it's also important to make sure that whatever goes into this needs to be accessible and not scary. As somebody who just bought a house a few years ago, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. Didn't necessarily have the best of support. Not that, people weren't supportive. It's just they weren't necessarily educated.
Sure.
And so one of the things that I was really scared of was getting into a historic home, because it was like, oh my gosh, to me that was a money pit, because that is what I have a family in construction. They're not exactly pro, saving things. So he's also not necessarily, pro saving things. So, I hear a lot from that side of the fence of just tear it down, put something new. Making it not so scary and not fiscally draining.
Right.
Would also be very useful.
Yeah.
love historic homes, but, you know, teacher, anything.
Do you think infill construction is going to be major, especially in the district? And I worry as someone who lives in a district with narrow lots that and it's just driving down the street, there's a lot of 25, 35 foot lots in Jefferson City. And if those don't meet the zoning of the city, well, either the zoning's gonna change or we're gonna have to figure out a design solution
Yes.
for that.
Yeah, and that is definitely one key issue that we've already identified, and we had some conversations with Rachel and some of the planning folks this afternoon about that, and I don't know at this stage exactly how that will be resolved, but that's definitely something that that's a key priority item to get resolved in the guidelines, because obviously if, you know, as you say, if the lots may be technically, you know, conforming because they're grandfathered under the zoning, but if the dimensional building requirements mean that you can only build a 5 foot wide building on a 25 foot wide lot, you can't build on the lot, obviously. So we want to make sure that is addressed so that all of those lots in those districts are
Well, and unfortunately, a lot of the houses being built on the lots that are buildable do not
right.
conform to the neighborhoods either.
Right. The other is there input at this point?
District.
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas on what you're gonna put in there?
So I don't think we're going to put anything in there.
I meant in regards to the guidelines.
Okay, sure. At this point, no, I'm not exactly sure at this point how that's going to ultimately shape up in terms of the deliverables for this project. And I think it's going to require a lot more continued engagement with the city and with you all and with other members of the community. But the way that we're envisioning it at this point is that it would probably be a series of principles, of statements, essentially, that would talk about different ways that the history of that area could be revealed, and that could be anything from, you know, historical mapping in GIS. It could be public infrastructure improvements, interpretive signage, things like that. I mean, there are lots of ways within the kind of the cultural history planning. But I think what we'd like to do is, you know, working through the process, maybe outline some priorities so that there's at least something on paper that if a community member or the city or whomever wanted to, say, apply for a grant to do a project, that there would be some recommendations already in place that would support that. Ultimately, I think that area probably would be best served by some sort of a cultural heritage plan. Unfortunately, that's not within our purview in this project, but that's kind of how we're beginning to think of it at this early stage. But unfortunately, I can't give you a whole lot. I don't have a lot of detail beyond that at this point.
That's fine. My only concern is that because this is the first historic legacy district.
Yeah.
Whatever goes into the guidelines is also probably going to serve as the backbone for what
That's a very good
drives
point, yes.
the next historic legacy district, and that can make or break it.
Yeah.
I also know because of this being a black neighborhood,
Sure.
there's some added
Absolutely,
layers there as well.
Yeah.
So I think whatever I think one of the principles you should add in there is always going back and asking the communities that are most, like the descendant communities most related or have some sort of affiliation to that area. I think that
Sure.
needs to be in there.
That's
Because
a great
fine
point.
and dandy for us as a body.
Right.
Very fairly not so diverse body to make some decisions, but you know, I'm not a native Jefferson City person. I'm an outsider. You know, there's some pros and cons to that, but you know, I don't have the same pull or
Sure.
push in there versus somebody who's from that area.
Yeah,
So I think making sure that we always add in that piece about what does the community greatest pull or connection to that area, what do they want?
Yeah.
They should always be consulted. They can say, we don't want to be involved in this project, but always having that option too.
Yeah, that's a great input. Really appreciate that.
The driving force of that legacy district has recently passed away.
Oh,
Robert Brown passed
Oh,
away.
he did?
And the community center is right there.
Yeah.
And I know Parks Department is already working with individuals to do some mapping in
Yeah.
that area. So, and Community Park does a good job of doing diverse sculptures and that type of thing. So, starting to get a good foundation as far as moving forward with doing some things in that area. We just have to make sure the momentum.
Sure.
So we talked about it today, so it's a little bit of a Band-Aid ripoff. He was kind of like, well, here's the, and I'm like, this doesn't, no land use, it doesn't have any structure. He's like, oh,
Yeah.
got it.
Community center is a structure.
It
isn't
is.
Lot
It
of
is.
land, that space.
that's the whole historic legacy district is how do we memorialize what is gone?
Yeah, we even talked about markers in front of where each location of the businesses stood, and
I think in there we also have to consider accessibility. That district.
yeah.
If I hear one more person say, why can't someone walk somewhere? I'm gonna scream.
Well, at least it's fairly flat, so you could, you could roll. Yeah.
Park at one of the churches there.
What do
Southside
other
Plan
cities do
walkability.
for their legacy districts?
There is no
We're
other
the
city
first.
with
But you know, we're the first to name it. But Market Street in St. Louis used to be the Black Business District, and there are no Black businesses on Market Street. Urban Renewal blasted them all out. So urban renewal impacted major cities, Kansas City, St. Louis, Baltimore. So all of these places have visible legacy districts. So I guess they're not worried for their.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, Columbia has done a lot to document
They have an
it.
African American heritage.
And Hannibal has done. I think was there the Wedge? There's a couple of.
Is that Hannibal, the Wedge?
I think the Wedge is, or is the Wedge Columbia? There's another name.
No,
Sharp
Sharp
End
End
is Columbia. I think the Wedge is Hannibal. So I mean, there's communities that are researching and documenting their historically Black neighborhoods, but they're not necessarily
Marking them.
designating them as historic districts. They're marking them with markers or using research or something else. But
Also has sidewalk markers.
like for the Black Wall Street in Tulsa. And
Who spoke to us when we were trying to get
That's great.
your comment regarding Capitol Avenue District being most complex or the most, what was that? How so?
Well, I think
The Lower Jefferson addresses new construction
well,
too.
it does. I guess it in our initial research of the existing standards and kind of comparing them to the Secretary of the Interior standards, they seem to be the most comprehensive, I guess, in terms of what they cover. And so we wanted to kind of start from that basis of, okay, what's covering the most topics or the most parameters. I mean, the Lower Jefferson ones are quite comprehensive as well.
Mark Moon's read those.
Yeah.
SHPO.
He was the SHPO.
SHPO director.
He was with me for years.
Second, where was I going with that? Because what I would like to see is some unity. The only reason why we have conservation district and historic district is because there was a percentage that we had to reach as far as signatures from neighbors. And, you know, the Lower Jefferson was on a timeline and we had to get it through due to things going on in the neighborhood. So that's why we had to kind of settle for that title, although our guidelines are super historic guidelines, you know. So I would kind of like to, instead of having, and we used to have an advisory district too in the ordinance, and I'm like, well, that's silly. We're just going to advise you to do this, you know. Why go through that work to have guidelines if it's just advisory? So I think we just have the conservation and historic now, but I would kind of like to get rid of like conservation one.
Sure.
Because I think of, you know, environmental things when it comes to conservation districts, although our guidelines for Lower Jefferson did say that you could not mature trees, and city staff said we had to take that out. So we added, unless they're in the way of construction, city staff was okay with that. You weren't here at the time, so I'm not, but
It's fine.
so anyway, we were told we had to take a lot out of it, you know. So I would like to see something, you know, uniform.
Sure.
Again, so it's easy for people to do it on their street or in their neighborhood.
Absolutely. That is certainly the goal of this project.
I think the timing of this is happening because of what's happening with P and Capitol Avenue. This could be a good, because I think it's still undetermined what's going to happen with the 400 block. Some parts of that has been figured out, but there's still a condemnation process for the pursuit of the other properties. So having some sort of, that's where we talked extensively about infill and what that could look like, and I think being able to provide a visual for what that could look like. That develops.
We're all trying to process.
I'm getting hungry.
Well, I do very much appreciate the extra time this evening, and we'll collect the workbooks. I appreciate any feedback that you all have provided, and we'll get copies of the material out to you as well, so that you can have some additional time to go through it at your leisure, and certainly send us any further thoughts or feedback that you have. So.
For me, with this tonight.
Yeah, what's your time frame on your entire process?
So the whole thing, I'll just go back to the beginning here, the timeline. So the whole thing will be done by the end of February of next year. But essentially, we're looking at having the 30% draft. The SHPO milestone is we're actually working to get that finalized now, but it'll be on or around September 5th. 70% draft about around the end of October, and 100% draft middle of December. So.
Thank you.
Great. thank you all so much. I very, very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
I didn't make any. Oh, that's good. I'm gonna keep that separate.
So. We need a motion. Okay, we have a motion, just to adjourn, right?
Yep.
Anything else?
I move.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
I didn't have a pen, so I didn't write anything.
Oh,
so-
okay.